Well, it's powerful stuff. We use a different word for rumination in AA. We call it resentment. That's what he was talking about. Resentment, replaying over and over in the mind negative situations, and they become more and more powerful and more frightening and more angry, and they take over the mind. And the big book says that resentment is the number one offender, destroys more alcoholics than anything. And here I thought it was cheap whiskey that was destroying alcoholics. But what they're saying is it's resentment. And from it flow all forms of spiritual disease. And later on, or right in that area in the book, it says the problem of the alcoholic lies in the mind. That's what that was all about, mental hygiene. In order to find that out and learn something about that, I had to stop drinking and doing drugs, which meant I was suddenly flooded with an absolute tidal wave, a tsunami of negative emotions. The 100 forms of fear and self-delusion and self-hatred and resentment were there, and my emotional buffer. I mean, the thing that seemed to have worked for so long, but now was destroying me, alcohol or other drugs, were not solving the problem. As a matter of fact, they were the problem. So I take that stuff away, and what's left is this mess. I was a hot mess, big time, and so it took some understanding and learning. There's a phrase that we read when we read how it works. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. What the hell does that have to do with getting sober? And I realized nothing. It has absolutely nothing to do with getting sober. You pass out long enough, you'll get sober. You'll sober right up. We quit drinking and drugging long enough, sobriety happens. Now what? But I had some ideas about living, about myself and the people around me, who I was, and these ideas were basically wrong. But being egocentric and prideful and arrogant, I didn't want to admit that I was wrong. I had gotten into the victim-perpetrator game. Other people were my problem. I wasn't the problem. They were the problem. If you were married to the woman I'm married to, you drink too. If you had to work for the boss I have to work for, you would drink too. If you had to live in this crappy world, you would drink too. So I would play the victim. And that will destroy us all. Once again, the big book. Some of us tried to hold. Well, no. Our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. In other words, what is sick is the mind. The mind is sick. It's full of wrong ideas and wrong emotions. Now, I hear when I say wrong, I don't know. That sounds. I don't like that word because it sounds like, well, there's something wrong with you because you're having a bad feeling. No, that's not an attack. It's just a realization that there are certain energies, negativity, he talked about that, the negative, hopeless, depressed sense of life sucks and then you die, we might as well get it over with right now, what the hell, I'll blow my brains out. And I've stood at that place with a gun barrel in my mouth and had that thought in the depths of my madness. So that's where that stuff will take you. So we suggest that the problem lies in the mind and that there's a spiritual solution to the mental and physical problem. Now the challenge is that in today's, first of all, we live in a society that turns victimhood into basically it's the national political game. You got to find out what politically protected class you're in which you're a victim of somebody or something, and then somebody will take care of you. You can get a lawyer and sue for a lot of money. The government will get a bunch of handouts. Oh, poor pitiful you. You're discriminated against. You're this, you're that. There's no hope for you. If you buy into that, you're going to spend the rest of your life in a great deal of misery. We have a totally radical solution that says, look, they may be discriminating against me, and they may not like me, and things may be tough, but by God, that's not my problem. My problem is that I bought into that, and I thought that limited me. I did a lot of sales motivation training and stuff like that when I was making some pretty good money in the 80s before my alcoholism and drug addiction really took off. Because when I started making real good money, I started using a lot of cocaine, and that whatever functional alcoholic thing I had been going through for about 15 years, the cocaine just, the wheels came off very quickly. But I used to study this stuff and talk about it and whatever. I learned some interesting things. Do you know that a circus elephant in a tent is the only thing that's keeping that circus elephant in the tent is a chain about that big, wrapped around one foot and staked to the ground. And if that tent catches fire, they got to go in and lead the elephant out because he will not try to get away. Even though you look at this 3-ton mammal and you look at that little chain, and this is, it's like breaking a paper clip to you and me. But he won't even try. Why is that? The answer is they train baby elephants when they're little. I'm going to be in circus. I know this if you're a PETA member and all this. This is terrible, but this is what they do. They get a little elephant, and they put that chain around his ankle, and they stamp, then they put that post in the ground, and for a while the elephant will try to walk away or run away. And come to the end of that chain, snap! Grabs his ankle, feels pain. Bleeds a little. Comes back, tries it again. After a while, he quits trying. Now, over time, the situation completely changes. The elephant's 10 times bigger, and the chain is just as small. Only he's got it in his mind that he can't break that chain. That's what's wrong with people. Each of us have in our mind a sense of limitation and lack that runs so deep that we're so completely convinced it's true that we never even examine the idea that it might be false or that things might have changed. Here's one of the techniques I used to use to help people learn how to sell. In order to sell successfully, I had to learn how to meet strangers, which I found to be enormously difficult at first because I was afraid of rejection. But here's the deal. When I was a child, and I happened to have been born into a family that actually wanted me, I've met a lot of people come from much worse families than that when my walk through sobriety. But I was blessed to have a family that wanted me. I didn't particularly want them, but they wanted me. But they taught me some things when I was about this tall. And here were 2 things they taught me. They taught me, don't talk to strangers and keep your hands to yourself. Okay, so now, 25 years later, I want to try to learn to be a salesman. And this guy's sitting over there. Now, in order to get to meet him, I got to do this. Hey, my name's Morgan. How you doing? Okay. Now, parental training, like that young elephant, when I was this tall, was still operative. It still controlled me. Okay? I had to break through that. I had to recognize the situation had changed. That was good advice for a 5-year-old. If you're going to try to make it in the world as an adult, it might be a skill to learn how to meet people you haven't met before, which is going to involve not doing what I was taught when I was 5 years old. I'm going to have to learn how to do something different. But because I was constrained by fear, it was difficult to do it. And this is the limitation that we all have. And I, a long time ago, a president named Franklin Roosevelt, he took office in the middle of the worst depression this country had ever seen, and he said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we talk about the spiritual malady, meaning sickness, and at the heart of that sickness is fear. We have a fear prayer on page 68 of the big book. It talks about the book talks about this ceaseless fear. Anxiety is like termites ceaselessly eating away at whatever quality of life we might have, whatever sobriety we might find ourselves capable of enjoying. And if we can't break out of this fear, if we can't outgrow it, then we're lost. I know a lot of frightened and angry sober people. They don't drink, but they're not real happy. I don't want what they have. I had that before. And we're talking about a way of outgrowing it. And the book says we don't apologize for God. We pray and we ask God to remove the feeling of fear. It's a feeling. We ask God to remove the feeling. And we ask God to show us what he would have us be. And at once we commence to outgrow fear. So I taught myself how to pray when I'm afraid. The other thing they taught me in the big book was that right action will cure fear. Do the next right thing. They taught me some right actions that were more effective for my long-term health than taking a drink if I'm afraid or angry, which I've learned also are pretty much the same emotion. Anger is fear turned outward. It's inwardly frightened, outwardly defiant, and defensive. So when that energy is there, I've been taught some skills other than calling my dope dealer. I've been taught the idea of course, prayer first. I say, of course. I mean, to me, that's bedrock. But it took me a while to come to that. But before I got to the place where I had a prayer and meditation life, it was call somebody. Call your sponsor. Call a friend in the program. Talk about it. It will get smaller if you'll talk about it. It's an amazing thing. But what happens is when I was in fear and resentment, all those old feelings that used to make me really thirsty were suddenly all over me again. That resentment about what she did or what they did was cooking, and my instant replay mind was showing all of this. Or I had myself on the hot seat, and I was saying all these terrible things to myself. See, the more I sat there and cooked in that stuff, the worse it got, and the more likely I was going to go and have a drink. And they said, you got to interrupt that cycle, and here's a practical way to do it. And that is to pick up the phone and call somebody. Well, I don't know who to call. Well, go to some meetings and make some new friends. Once again, I have to talk to a stranger and put out my hand, right? And basically, people don't come toward this way of living until, at least I didn't, until I was utterly desperate. Utterly and completely desperate. I mean, I got pretty good. I'm an outgoing guy. I got pretty good at meeting strangers and all that stuff. But when my, alcoholism and drug addiction, I mean, I was at the end. I was just sitting in a room by myself doing drugs, feeling sorry for myself. It's all hopeless and pitiful, and it doesn't matter, and I might as well kill myself, and life sucks, and then you die, and and of course I make myself feel better by getting all stoked up on drugs and then watching a Jerry Springer show, so that I can feel superior. Because they'd bring some truly wretched trailer trash up onto that stage in Chicago, and they'd tell some really grotesque stories, and I think, well, shit, I'm better than that. At least I have the decency to drink myself to death, out of sight of the public, when all I really had to do was call somebody and say, I'm really feeling terrible today. I can't. Let's talk about this. And something? When I learned to do it, I started to come out of the shell. I started to heal. It all started to come back together. Loneliness, I think that's a really, really critical part of the late-stage alcoholism. It's a terrible loneliness. It's the sense of being so totally, uniquely twisted and sick that nobody would want to have anything to do with me. And I'm going to tell you something. I do not know what... See, I know for a fact none of you is actually listening to me. You're listening to that voice in your head that's commenting on what you hear me saying. And that voice in the head is what we have to look at. What is that voice saying? Because I'm going to tell you something. I finally realized that the voice in my head when I was on the hot seat was saying things to me that if any other human being had actually verbalized to me, I would be perfectly justified in blowing their brains out. And I could probably find a not very effective lawyer to actually get me off on the charges. Okay. I'm serious. It's absolutely amazing the viciousness with which I attacked myself. And this has to stop. This crap has to stop. Otherwise, you're never going to stay sober. I mean, you will get drunk again. You will blow your brains out. It'll get so bad, you'll just get locked up and we'll never see you again. So this is why the issues and the difficulties, the problems that the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous focus on are not drinking. We dispense with the word alcohol in the first half of step 1. It stops being about that. It starts being about all this other trash that's going on in our heads and hearts. That has to be looked at and surrendered, rejected, overturned, outgrown. We have a totally mechanism for doing that. I committed many crimes, many of them against the law, some of them not against the law, but they were terrible things that I had done to ruin relationships around me. I was a liar, a cheat, a thief, a philanderer, a dope dealer. I was a miserable human being. And so a lot of the things that I was saying, terrible things I was saying about myself, at one point in time weren't all that far off the mark because my actions had become, those things I said about myself were becoming true. So they showed me a mechanism by which I could work through these steps and I could make the amends I needed to make. I could reestablish relationships with the people around me. I could put all that stuff in the past and walk forward into a brand new life. And stopping drinking and drugging is the first, it's the step before the first step. The big book doesn't even tell us to stop drinking. It says if you're not sure you're an alcoholic, go across the street and do some controlled drinking. See how that's working for you. The only place in the book where it says do not drink is in the doctor's opinion, where it says the only solution we have to offer is total abstinence. That means no more whiskey. Now, in this day and age, we have many other chemicals that we can leap to, and if I'm going to, for me, if I'm going to continue to medicate my painful feelings, I'm not going to outgrow them. Now, I'm going to start treading on some toes here if I'm not careful, but I happen to, just for one thing, I happen to be aware that the marijuana maintenance program is alive and well at Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I ain't drinking. I'm no damned alcohol in about 4 years. I smoke a little dope on the weekends, take the rough edges off and all that. Well, if I'm going to look for chemical peace, I'm probably not going to find spiritual peace. And if you're watching TV or you're aware, you've been to some therapists or hospitals or whatever, man, they're really ready to handle a lot of feel-good pills out there. I haven't had a drink in almost 30 years, but I became a pillhead after 4 years of struggling with all of this stuff inside of me, and I couldn't, for whatever reason, I didn't get deep enough the first pass through here in the 80s. I started telling myself that I had some physical pain which required some pain pills. I found a doctor who agreed with me, would give me the pain pills. So pretty soon I'm taking the pain pills and the sleeping pills for the emotional pain that I should be dealing with through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I didn't do it. I went this other road. So suddenly I've done an addiction switching. I still got the same selfish, self-centered, negative, terrible attitudes. I've just shifted. So I'm not drinking alcohol. I'm eating pain pills. I see people that they quit drinking and next thing you know, they weigh 300 pounds. Or they go the other way. They become anorexic. They stop eating altogether. Or I know a guy who's a number of years of sobriety he's addicted to scratch-offs. He can't stop playing the lottery. Porn addiction is real. We live in this terribly addicted society. So the issue is, how am I going to deal with all this terrible negativity? And I believe, from my personal experience tells me, that I truly have to find and form a relationship with a power greater than myself that will solve that problem, because me with my big overeducated brain couldn't figure it out. I couldn't do it. I had to actually have the experience of God. Step 12, the experience of God. It's a transformative experience. And that's what we seek in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, some people seem to be okay with release from active alcoholism, which I got to that place in the 80s. I wasn't spending, God, I can remember when I first started coming around here in the early 80s, it was like, I get sober I'm not going to drink today. Okay. Well, then I'd have this chatter going on in my head. It was like, make me crazy, this cacophony of, well, one wouldn't hurt. Yeah, but I told my wife, I told myself I'm not going to drink. Well, okay, I smoke a joint. No, I'm not going to smoke a joint. I shouldn't smoke a joint. Well, maybe I will. Maybe later. Maybe tomorrow. Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? That's the craziness. That's the obsession of the mind. And if you're sitting in this room, you've probably experienced this. I really want to quit and I can't. So chatter, until finally I use it again. And then and then of course it all twists off, gets sick and twisted. I crash, come to, and start the whole process again. So that went away. But what I discovered later was I had many other obsessions. I still hadn't gotten to the heart of those resentments, that rumination, if you will, the resentments, which is, again, it's just this voice in the head that's saying all these terrible things about either me or other people, or in my case, me and other people. It's terribly judgmental, very hateful. And these are deep spiritual maladies. And we offer a way to deal with them. And I've very simply stated, I don't think there's any hope for an alcoholic and drug addict unless they're ready to try to take a look at this. Because a completely dry version of Morgan was a suicide waiting to happen. That's it. So we talk about a psychic change. That's what we're really talking about. Anyway, but this was great. This is good stuff, man. This is good. That we live in a subjective space. In other words, I'll try it this way. I've learned, my conviction today is that life is about 80% attitude and about 20% the stuff that actually happens. And so my attitude toward life, my approach to life, has radically changed, and I've reached a place of deep gratitude, a willingness to live and let live. My head voice with all those hateful conversations has pretty much gone away. I know what to do when it pops back up, which it does from time to time, but I know it's all bullshit. Thank you for sharing. You don't need to hear that. and then, set about talking to and helping some other people. So I found that life just works. And I have this sense of this presence of a spirit and a power. It's like I said, empowering. Okay? And life is wonderful. I don't stay sober because I'm an alcoholic. It's not why I stay sober. I stay sober because I love being sober. I love the life I've been given to lead. That's the promise that we offer you. Anyway, I talk too much. You guys, shut up, Morgan. I'm done.